Okay, shall we start reading? I read each sentence. Okay. But the spirit can be poised in the principle of life. So what he's saying is that there is basically at the highest level, there is pure spirit. It is absolutely without any spot of limitation or imperfection. But the spirit wants to manifest itself, and manifestation we have seen implies limitation of oneself. So there is limitation of Sat, there is limitation of consciousness, there is limitation of Shakti, and there is also limitation of Ananda. And limitation naturally makes it more and more dark, and more light becomes dark. So now at the lowest level, spirit can station itself in matter. That is, the materialists will not agree, but those who have had spiritual experience, they know that the divine is there even in matter, but it is hiding behind the thick veil of matter. Now, Sindhu is saying it can also poise itself in the life element, that is one step above the matter. Okay. So now let us see what he is going to say. So, but spirit can be poised in the principle of matter, life, not in matter. The spirit so founded becomes the vital self of a vital world, a life soul of a life energy in the reign of a consciously dynamic nature. So there you are. Let's understand what he's saying. There is a universal plane of prana which is a life. Okay? And it individualizes itself into an individual, and that also is the so the we'll read the uh, what he's saying is very similar to the ocean. In the cold season, the ocean makes itself, it condenses itself into icebergs. The iceberg is nothing but the sea individualized. So this is exactly what Sylvia is saying here. We can picture it to ourselves. There is a sea of prana. There is also a sea of matter. There is a sea of prana. There is a sea of mind. There is a sea of all the higher planes of consciousness. All these seas are different. But the sea can also individualize itself. And a good image is the sea producing icebergs. The iceberg is the individualized sea. So this is what he's saying. Now look at the sentence you see. The spirit so founded becomes the vital self of a vital world. The vital world is the ocean, and the vital self is the iceberg. It individualizes itself. The life soul of a life energy. The life soul, necessarily when it says life soul, is an individual, and the life energy is a universal. So this is the constantly there is an interaction with the universe and the individual. Okay. In the reign of a consciously dynamic nature, the life is dynamic nature. Life is something movement. Its characteristic is movement, change all the time. Whereas the matter is exactly the opposite. Stability, attempt at permanence is the nature of matter. There is something not easily moved. Tamas is the principle. But in life, it is the prana, the rajas, that's the movement. So that's why he's saying consciously note the word dynamic nature. Dynamic exactly suggests that it is full of movement and power. Okay? So clear this sentence? There is a sea and there is an individual in it which the sea itself forms. Just like our body has been formed from matter. I read the next sentence. Absorbed in the experience of the power and the play of a conscious life, it is dominated by the desire, activity, and passion of the Rajasic principle proper to vital existence. The Rajasic principle is absolutely dominant. It's a king of the vital world. It is there in the other worlds also, but it's not the king. It becomes a subject. Okay. Whereas in matter, the principle of substance is the king, and all the other things also are there, but they are reduced into conditioned and limited things. Even the supermind is there in matter, but it is imprisoned, it is conditioned. Matter is the king there. Now here, life, the prana is the principle, is the king, if you want. Okay, he is the ruler. So everything else is there, but it has to obey the laws of prana. That's what Sri is saying. Absorbed in the experience of the power and the play of a conscious life, it is dominated. What is the nature of that power? Desire, activity, movement, okay? Constant agitation and passion of the Rajasic principle, energy, movement, okay? Rajasic principle proper to the vital existence. It is the maximum in the vital existence, the pranic world. Rajas is the main principle. In the individual, he is talking of the universe, but in the individual, this spirit becomes a vital soul, pranamaya purusha. So you can think of the vital soul, pranamaya purusha, as the iceberg at the vital level. Okay, so you can think of the individualized soul, the individualized universal prana molds itself and limits itself into an individual vital soul. Note the word vital soul. Huh? There is a personality. There is a physical personality. There is a vital personality. There is a mental personality. In other places, it's all the. We are not just one piece. We are all these personalities are there in us together. And not only that, even the past life personalities are also there all in us. Normally, these things don't make any difference. They are in the background. And we are quite consistent in our actions. But sometimes this mechanism does not work. And you have the multiple personality disorder. You have heard of that, I think, okay? Schizophrenia. So sometimes you are behaving like one person, sometimes you are behaving like some other person. If you are identified with the vital, you behave in a certain way. If you are identified with the mind, you behave in a totally different way. Or even from past lives. Okay? So this is what Shagli is saying. In the individual spirit, it becomes a vital soul, pranamaya purusha. But it is already the annamaya purusha. And next we will discuss the Manomaya Purusha. All these are personalities which are all there lurking in the background. Sometimes, as I said, they don't lurk in the background, and you have this peculiar phenomenon of schizophrenia. Or you can also, they usually, schizophrenia is a very specific word. It can mean other things also. But normally you use the word multiple personality disorder. Okay, and there are very interesting videos, and you can see that how one person, when the other personality starts coming in, you realize that it is coming in, and even the person says in the video, I am now going to become the other person, and then totally changes. Okay, so this is the, so you are now, when the consciousness is concentrated in the vital world, it's a pranamaya purusha. Okay? In whose nature the life energies tyrannize over the mental and physical principles. In other words, the prana is the king. It rules. And Sremda is saying not only rules but tyrannize. Okay? It forces the mind to listen to its own desires. It forces even the body to listen to its own desires. Tyrannize. Not the word, huh? The vital is a terrible thing. Okay. So, but once you tame the vital, it becomes a very obedient servant. Okay. So, over the mental and physical principles. I read the next sentence. The physical element in a vital world readily shapes its activities and formations in response to desire. It's a very philosophical statement, but what it says is that the body very willingly obeys the desires. That's what it ultimately comes to. The body obeys the desires of the vital. Okay. Note there, I'll read the sentence again. The physical element in the vital world, the body in the vital, readily shapes its activities and formations in response to desire and its imaginations. It serves and obeys the passion and power of life and their formations and does not thwart or limit them as it does here on earth, where life is a precarious incident in inanimate matter. The mental element too is molded and limited by the life power. In the vital world, the mind plays second fiddle. It has not got its own, it cannot insist on its own ways. The mind, in other words, the mind also falls victim to the desires. That's what it, practically that's what it means. Okay? That the mind does not have enough power over the vital. You can force it sometimes, but that's only temporary. It does not solve the problem. So which is that one which can control the vital? As Surendra says very clearly, it's only the psychic being that can sort of mold the vital and remove its imperfections. Then it can become a tame animal, but otherwise it's a wild animal. The physical element in a vital world readily shapes its activities and formation in response to desire and its imaginations. It serves and obeys the passion and power of life and their formations and does not thwart or limit them. Okay? The desire, sometimes you may feel that the mind is saying, no, I will not do the desire that is coming. But how long will it resist? Finally, it becomes a victim. That's it. Does not thwart or limit them as it does here on earth. On earth, now that's a very interesting sentence what Sanjay is saying here. On earth, the mind has some power over the vital, not very serious. But in the vital world, if you are in the vital world, okay, your consciousness is concentrated in the vital world, then the mind has no power. And who is that person whose vital is, who is stationed in the vital world? Those who are very rajasic, those who are very vitalistic. Their vital is the most dominant. Okay? And then that's what you will see. Now, he is talking also of the mind. The mental element too is molded and limited by the life power, obeys it, and helps only to enrich and fulfill the earth of its desires. Okay? It adds its own capacities, but it enlarges the scope of the desires and energy of its impulses. This vital soul lives in a vital body composed of a substance much subtler than physical matter. So, very clear sentence that all these words are ultimately substance. The substance in the physical world is matter. The substance in the vital world is subtler and more free. That's why they use the image of water. Okay, but it is also a substance. It is slightly less dense than matter. When you come to mind, it becomes even less dense. Very similar to the atmosphere on the earth. As you keep going higher and higher, the density of air starts reducing. So that's a good example of what is there also in the spiritual planes of consciousness. As you keep going higher and higher, the substance of all those worlds becomes less and less dense, more and more subtle. Okay? That's what Sandra is saying. So, the vital soul lives in a vital body composed of a substance much subtler than physical matter. It's a substance surcharged with conscious energy. Now note that. Okay? The substance also is surcharged with conscious energy. We can't think of matter having energy, but in matter it is, energy is there, but it is sleeping. But in the vital world it's not sleeping anymore. It's full of energy. It's the energy that controls the substance there. Okay? So, much more, much subtler than physical matter. It's a substance surcharged with conscious energy, capable of much more powerful perceptions, capacities, sense activities than any that the gross atomic elements of earth matter can offer. The energy is 10 times more in the vital world than in matter. Man too has in himself, behind his physical being, subliminal to it, unseen and unknown, but very close to it and forming with it the most naturally active part of his existence, this vital soul, this vital nature, and this vital body. So there also, there is a vital soul, a vital nature, and a vital body. A whole vital plane connected with the life world. Okay? or desire world is hidden in us, a secret consciousness in which life and desire find their untrammeled play and their easy self-expression, and from there throw their influences and formations on our outer life. The sea is constantly interacting with the iceberg. That's what Sydney is saying. It has an effect. The iceberg also is throwing its energies into the universe, but it's of a much, much lesser order. It's very weak, but the universe is constantly controlling the individual. Okay, that's what it is. So we go to the next para. The ladder of self-transcendence. So next he will also speak about the mind. Okay, the mind world, but that will come a little later. So we read the next one, in proportion as the power. Good read. Yeah, go ahead, Archanati, Yasmin. Archanati can read. Okay. In proportion. Go ahead.
In proportion as the power of this vital plane manifests itself in him and takes hold of his physical, this son of earth becomes a vehicle of the life, forceful in his desires, vehement in his passions and emotions, intensely dynamic in his action, more and more the Rajasic. It is possible now for him to awaken in his consciousness to the vital plane and to become the vital source, Pranamaya Purusha, put on the vital nature and live in the secret vital as well as the visible physical body. If he achieves this change with no fullness or one pointedness, usually it is under great and salutary limitations or attended by saving complexities. And without rising beyond these things, without climbing to a supravital height from which they can be used, purified, uplifted, he becomes the lower type of Asura or Titan, a Rakshasa in nature, a soul of sheer power and life energy, magnified or racked by a force of unlimited desire and passion, hunted and driven by an active capacity and colossal Rajasic ego, but in possession of far greater and more various powers than those of the physical man in the ordinary, more inert earth. Even if he develops mind greatly on the vital plane and uses its dynamic energy for self control as well as for self satisfaction, it will still be Ajism, tapasya, although of a higher type and directed to a more governed satisfaction of the Rajasic ego.
So now, from the universal vital world, he is talking of the individual vital world, the vital individual. So he says that you can see, if you are very observant, you will see that some people are full of energy. They cannot remain silent. They are constantly engaged in activities. Okay, that's a vital world. They are full of energy and they go on doing that. Okay, there are many such people, and usually it expresses itself in very negative ways also. That's what they're saying, the Rakshasic nature comes out. Ego is very strong, dominance is very strong. They want to be the first in everything. They want to dominate over others. They want to always fulfill their desires. So this is the, but if it is controlled, it can be of great use. That's what Siddha is saying in the book. Okay. So the vital energy is absolutely necessary. But if the vital is purified, it can be a tremendous force for action in the world, pure action. But normally it's not like that, it's the other way around. So we'll quickly go through the, para sentence by sentence. In proportion as the power of this vital plane manifests itself in man and takes hold of his physical being, this son of earth becomes a vehicle for the life energy, forceful in its desire, in his desires, vehement in his passions and emotions, intensely dynamic in his action, more and more the Rajasic man. That's a very interesting sentence, and we have to see, he is suddenly saying the son of earth. So why is he saying that? We'll have to look at it. The vital world is different from the physical world. But in the physical world, we have men and we have creatures who are a combination of all these things. Okay? So, in proportion as the power of this vital plane manifests itself in man. In man, the vital plane can have not much influence in a person. So if the vital is weak, then you have the tamasic man. He is more concentrated only on the in his body. That's more real to him, and he is not very active. So such people you can see, they are tamasic. Their movements are slow, their understanding is slow, they go on procrastinating, they take a long time to do something. Suppose they decide something today, they'll do it after 5 days. Okay? This is the nature of procrastination. You go on postponing. Okay? So this is the nature of the physical being. But if the vital enters into the Son of Man, why is the saying Son of Man? Because basically he is springing from the earth. That's his main thing. So if even in the Son of Man, who is a piece of earth, okay, the vital world enters into him with force, then he becomes the vital man. And the nature of the vital man is he wants to satisfy his emotions, his passions, intensely dynamic in his action, more and more Rajasic man. There are many examples you can see. Okay? The famous example of one who became almost a Rakshasic element was Rasputin in Japan, in Russia. Okay, very, very vital person, but going in the wrong way. And in India, we have this, our Prime Minister is also very, very Rajasic. He is supposed to be working 16 hours a day. Okay, really. And he goes on, and even in midnight, he goes and visits people, he goes on talking. I've heard that those IAS officers sometimes get fed up with him because he goes on pushing them for action and no more postponing of decisions. And when the new plan in Delhi was going on, what do they call it? I've forgotten the name. Okay. So he used to go at midnight to check what's going on. Okay. So such is his energy. But mostly directed in the right way. So that's one example. So this Son of Man becomes a vehicle of the life energy. Now the description of the physical, vital man, forceful in his desires. He wants to definitely somehow or other fulfill his desires, vehement in his passions and emotions, intensely dynamic in his action, more and more the Rajasic man. It is possible now for him to awaken in his consciousness to the vital plane and to become the vital soul, Pranamaya Purusha. He can identify himself with the Pranamaya Purusha, put on the vital nature and live in the secret vital as well as the physical, visible physical body. He is there in the body, but mainly he is dominated by his vital. If he achieves this stage with some fullness or one-pointedness, okay, usually it is under great and salutary limitations or attended by saving complexities. That's a very interesting sentence. If we can do this fully, he becomes full of energy, but the energy is not applied in the wrong way. It's a use the word great and salutary limitations. He is using his the desires are limited, okay, and the passions are limited, but the energy is there pure. That's what he means. Usually, it's under great and salutary. Salutary means beneficial. Okay, limitations are attended by saving complexities. The nature of human being is so complex, but there are saving complexities. And without rising beyond these things, without climbing to a supra-vital height from which they can be used, purified, uplifted, he becomes, if he is not capable of doing, then he becomes the lower type of Asura or Titan, a Rakshasa in nature. But if he is full of energy and he goes to a higher level, so they use the word supra-vital height. If he goes above and controls his vital, then he can become something quite different. But if he can't do that, he becomes a lower type of Asura or Titan, a Rakshasa in nature, a soul of sheer power and life energy, magnified or racked by a force of unlimited desire and passion, hunted and driven by an active capacity and colossal Rajasic ego, but in possession of far greater and more various powers than those of the physical man in the ordinary, more inert earth nature. This is a, that's exactly what Srila is describing here, is this Ravana. Okay? He is described, I just today in the morning I read that piece where Hanuman is brought in the presence of Ravana and he is stunned by his glory and his light and his duty, his illumination and his power. He is absolutely stunned and saying, my God, look at this. He is like a God. The only difference between an Asura and the God is that the Asura is using all this energy and all his knowledge and tapasya also, but for ego. That's all. That's the only difference. Okay? So this is the he is describing. They can be equal to the gods. They can be tremendously powerful, but for the wrong purpose. Ego. That's what Sri is describing here. Magnificent description of the. So even in the physical world, you will see people like that, no? Who are constantly full of action, full of power, full of effectivity. Whatever they want to do, they manage to do successfully. But it's mainly for their own ego. A Rakshasa in nature far greater than earth nature. I read the next sentence. Even if it develops mind greatly on the vital plane and uses its dynamic energy for self-control as well as for self-satisfaction, it will still be with asuric energism, although of a higher type and directed to a more governed satisfaction of the Rajasic ego. There can be a combination if the mind is very developed and it tries to control, still it is based mainly based on ego. That's what Sri is saying. Okay? So now we have got time. We got 15 minutes. So,
Can you say that the Chinese Xi Jinping and Putin are Rajasic people?
not
Xi
only that,
Jinping may be Asuric.
absolutely, there is no doubt about it. Because he wants to dominate the world and he goes on killing all his enemies. Okay? It is absolutely clear that he is an Asuric power. And that is the reason why many Chinese are getting fed up with him. Okay? He tramples on his enemies. Today only, yesterday, there was a news that he has condemned to death one of his own ministers. Okay? That is how he gets power. But he also creates fear and opposition in himself. So, absolutely, there is no doubt. He is a very good example today of someone who is. You can be Rajasic, but you can also be Asuric. In his case, it is very clearly, all these signs are so clear. Sri description is beautiful. A Rajasic man may not kill his enemies, but this fellow is killing his enemies. He is going on insisting that China is going to dominate the world. That's why he's having a fight with Australia. He's having a fight with Philippines, Indonesia. Okay, he wants to the Chinese Sea, that area. He wants to. He's creating islands so that he can have military bases there. And he is also entering into India and trying to terrorize India. So everywhere he wants to dominate. Will he succeed? No, he won't. The astrological predictions are very clear. He won't. India will rise and let's see what happens. It's a very interesting phase in history. It's fantastic. We are living at most exciting times. Okay, so let's go to the next para. This will be the third para we'll be reading today. So Archana ji read. So next, who can read? Either Sunki or Yasmin.
Shall I read?
Yes, please go ahead. But the vital plane.
But for the vital plane also, it is possible, even as on the physical, to rise to a certain spiritual greatness in its own kind. It is open to the vital man to lift himself beyond the conceptions and energies natural to the desire soul and the desire plane. He can develop a higher mentality and, within the conditions of the vital being, concentrate upon some realization of the spirit or self behind or beyond its form and power. If in this spiritual realization there would be a less strong necessity of quietism, for there would be a greater possibility of an active effectuation of this bliss and power of the eternal, mightier and more self satisfied powers, a richer flowing of the dynamic infinite. Nevertheless, that effectuality could never come anywhere near to a true and integral perfection, for the conditions of the desired world are like those of the physical, improper to the development of the complete spiritual life. The vital being too must develop spirit to the detriment of his fullness, activity, and force of life in the lower hemisphere of our existence and turn in the end away from the vital formula, away from life, either to the silence or to an ineffable power beyond him. If he does not withdraw from life, he must, enchained by life, limited in his self fulfillment by the downward pull of the desire world and its dominant Rajasic principle. On the vital plane also, in its own right alone, a perfect perfection is impossible. The soul that attains only so far would have to return to the physical life for a greater experience, a higher self development, a more direct ascent to the spirits.
It's a very interesting para where he's saying that a man need not, he can be mainly tamasic, he can also be mainly rajasic, but it's also possible for him to be semi rajaso mental. Okay. Rajaso sattvic. That's what he's discussing here. A man can be also quite mentally developed. It's not necessary that someone who is full of energy need not have a developed mind. It's very possible to have a developed mind with a lot of energy. Okay. So that also is possible. That's what he's discussing here. Let's have a look at what he's saying. He's so clear that there's a combination of all these. In synthesis, if you remember also, he says that there is a principle of Rajas, Sattva and Tamas, but nobody is of only one type. It's always a combination of all these and they are in different proportions. Okay? That's the thing there. Tamas may be less, Rajas and Sattva may be more, or sometimes the Sattva is more and Rajas is less and Tamas is less. All combinations possible. Okay, so this is now he is discussing the vital man who also has a developed mind. So we'll read this sentence. I think we can finish it. Okay, so, but for the vital plane also, it is possible, even as on the physical, to rise to a certain spiritual greatness in its own kind. Even a vital man can have a spiritual development. Part of his being can rise to the higher levels of consciousness. Remember that the consciousness is not something limited. It can be plastic, it can be elastic, and some of it can remain here, but part of it can also go into the spiritual planes of consciousness. It does not give full effectivity, but that's what he is discussing. Okay? It is open, so even as on the physical, to rise to a certain spiritual greatness in its own kind. It is open to the vital man to lift himself beyond the conceptions and energies natural to the desire soul and the desire plane. Although mainly he is identified with the desire soul, the vital, yet he can develop his mental powers. He can develop a higher mentality and within the conditions of the vital being, concentrate upon some realization of the spirit or self behind or beyond its forms and powers. So, some realization of the spirit or self. Okay. Behind would be the intraconscious, and beyond would be the self. Beyond is the vertical, and behind is the horizontal. Okay, the inner mind, the inner vital, and the inner physical. It is possible for him to enter into those planes of consciousness, or he can also go above. In the spiritual realization, the spiritual realization of man who is mainly vital, but who has got some development of the mind, he can rise and have an experience of the self. That's what Selva is describing. In his spiritual realization, there would be a less strong necessity of quietism. In other words, he need not be absolutely calm and quiet. Even if he is restless, okay, he can have a glimpse of the spirit. That's what Selva is saying. All combinations and permutations are possible. In the spiritual realization, there would be a less strong necessity of quietism, for there would be a greater possibility of an active effectuation of a bliss and power of the eternal, mightier and more self-satisfied powers, a richer flowering, okay, of the dynamic infinite. So, what he's saying is that if your lower nature is full of energy, your body, mind, life, okay, full of energy, the soul can rise to a higher level, and it can also have more effectivity in the physical world because the instrumentation of the vital is full of energy, so it can use that. That's what Srimad is pointing out. It's not necessary for a vital man to be non-spiritual. He can be. That's what he's pointing out. Okay. Self-satisfied power, a richer flowering of the dynamic infinite. Nevertheless, but what happens? How effective can he be spiritually? Nevertheless, that effectuality could never come anywhere near to a true and integral perfection, because it will be the energy in the physical world is always impure, but it can act to a certain extent with power, but it may be impure action. Okay, that's what you pointed. Nevertheless, that effectuality, the successful action that he does in the physical world, could never come anywhere near a true and integral perfection. For the conditions of the desired world are like those of the physical, improper to the development of a complete spiritual life. The pure vital is opposed to the spiritual. That's what I'm saying. Mainly. Improper. The vital being too must develop spirit to the detriment of its fullness, activity and force of life in the lower hemisphere of our existence. The lower hemisphere, level 1, where you have a body, you have a vital and you have a mind. That's a level 1, which is the lower hemisphere. When you rise into the spiritual planes of consciousness, it starts becoming the higher hemisphere. The lower hemisphere of our existence, and turn in the end away from the vital formula. So even a vital man has to control his vital and move away from the vital, more towards the higher nature, away from life, either to the silence or to an ineffable power. So such a man can go into the silence, or he can move to an ineffable power beyond it. He can open himself to a great power. That's what Sadhguru is saying. Or it could be the other way around also. All these cases are possible. If he does not withdraw from life, if he withdraws from life, then he gets silence. He can have an experience. If he does not withdraw from life, he must remain enchained by life, limited in his self-fulfillment by the downward pull of the desired world and its dominant rajasic principle. On the vital plane also, in its own right alone, a perfect perfection is impossible. It can be possible only at the highest level. The soul that attains only so far would have to return to the physical life for a greater experience, a higher self-development, the more direct ascent to the spirit. So, very clear statement, the vital man can have spiritual experiences, but he can never be perfect. He cannot get liberation. If he has to have liberation, he has to move away from vital. So he has to come back into the physical world. He must take rebirth again and develop his capacity for controlling mind. We are now at 8:34, so we got only 1 minute. Next, we have to read Above Matter and Life. So, something, make a note.
Yes, I'll make a note.
Okay. So, page 470 and Above Matter and Life stands at page 1. Now, he goes into the mental plane, the ladder of self transcendence. He has discussed physical matter, he has discussed the vital substance. Now, he will discuss the mental substance. Okay? Okay, I wish all of you a very happy day. Okay.
Thank you. Same to you.
Okay. Au revoir, everybody.
Thank you, Rangada.
Okay, au revoir.